Rain hammered the chapel windows like fists demanding entry. Inside, a woman stood at the altar in borrowed silk, her hands shaking not from cold, but from the eyes of the man beside her, Rowan Blackthorne, Duke of Ashford, whose reputation preceded him like winter fog. He didn't look at her during the vows, didn't flinch when she stumbled over her own name, and when the priest declared them bound, he turned and walked away without a word, leaving her standing there, alone, in front of 200 witnesses who didn't bother hiding their pity. This is the story of Elara Witcom, a woman society threw away, a marriage built on ice, and the storm that would force a frozen duke to his knees. Stay until the end to see how she turned humiliation into power. And if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's begin. The carriage smelled like damp leather and regret. Elara pressed her forehead against the rain-streaked window, watching the countryside blur into gray nothingness. Beside her, the Duke sat in perfect stillness, one gloved hand resting on his knee, the other holding a leather-bound ledger he hadn't opened since they left the chapel. He hadn't spoken either, not during the 30-minute ceremony, not during the reception where his family had smiled with their mouths and sneered with their eyes, not when her own mother had kissed her cheek and whispered, "Don't embarrass us." She'd stopped expecting conversation an hour ago. The Blackthorne estate appeared through the mist like something out of a ghost story, a sprawling gray monstrosity of stone and iron, gardens choked with weeds, windows dark as closed eyes. The carriage jolted to a stop. Rowan stepped out without offering his hand. Elara gathered her skirts and followed, her slippers squelching in the mud. A housekeeper waited at the entrance, skeletal and severe, her expression suggesting she'd been interrupted during something important. "Your Grace," she said to Rowan, ignoring Elara entirely. "The East Wing is prepared." "Good." Rowan handed his coat to a waiting footman. "See that my wife is shown to her quarters." "My wife." The words landed like coins on a counter. Transactional. Final. Elara opened her mouth, then closed it. What was there to say? "Thank you for marrying me to save my family from financial ruin. Thank you for reminding me I'm a purchased solution to a problem I didn't create." The housekeeper, Mrs. Hartwell, she'd learn later, led her up a staircase so vast it could have hosted a ball. Portraits lined the walls, generations of Blackthorns staring down with identical expressions of cold disapproval. Elara kept her eyes forward. "The Duchess's chambers," Mrs. Hartwell announced, pushing open a door to reveal a room that might have been grand once. Now it was a mausoleum. Heavy curtains blocked most of the light. The furniture was dark, ornate, suffocating. A four-poster bed dominated the space, its canopy sagging like something exhausted. "Dinner is at 8, Mrs. Hartwell said. His Grace prefers punctuality." She left before Elara could ask where the dining room was. Alone, Elara sank onto the edge of the bed. The mattress was hard. Everything in this place was hard. The floors, the walls, the silence. She thought about crying, then decided against it. Tears required an audience, and there was no one here who cared. Instead, she stood and walked to the window, pulled back the curtain. Outside, the garden sprawled in wild disarray, rose bushes strangled by ivy, paths swallowed by moss, a fountain cracked and dry. It looked like something had died here, and no one had bothered to bury it. A knock at the door startled her. "Come in." A young maid entered, barely 16, carrying a tray. "Thought you might be hungry, ma'am." "It's a long time until 8. Elara blinked. It was the first kindness anyone had shown her all day. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Bess, ma'am." "Thank you, Bess." The girl set the tray down, bread, cheese, weak tea, and hesitated. "If you need anything, ma'am, I'm usually in the kitchens." "I'll remember that." Bess ducked her head and slipped out. Elara ate slowly, mechanically, tasting nothing. At 8 o'clock sharp, she found the dining room, or rather, stumbled into it after 20 minutes of wandering and 3 wrong turns. Rowan was already seated at the head of an absurdly long table, reading correspondence. He didn't look up when she entered. Elara took the seat at the opposite end, a football field of polished mahogany between them. A servant brought soup. She picked up her spoon. The silence was so thick it had texture. Halfway through the first course, Rowan spoke. "You'll meet with the estate manager tomorrow. He'll explain your duties." Elara set down her spoon carefully. Duties? Household management, staff oversight, the usual responsibilities of your position. Your position, not my wife, not the Duchess, just a job description. I see, she said. Mrs. Hartwell will assist you. She's been here 30 years. Follow her guidance. Of course. Another stretch of silence. The clink of silverware felt obscenely loud. Is there anything else? Elara asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Rowan finally looked at her. His eyes were dark, unreadable, the kind of eyes that had seen things and decided not to feel them anymore. Yes, one thing. He stood, walked the length of the table, it took forever, and stopped beside her chair. Elara's heart kicked against her ribs. This marriage, he said quietly, serves a purpose. My family requires an heir. Yours requires financial security. That's the arrangement. I'll visit your chambers when the time is appropriate. Beyond that, we have no obligations to each other. Do you understand? Elara forced herself to meet his gaze. Perfectly. Good. He walked away. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. Elara sat there, soup growing cold, and realized with absolute clarity that she had not entered a marriage. She'd been buried alive. The days that followed were an education in loneliness. Rowan was a ghost. He left early, sometimes before dawn, and returned late, if at all. When their paths crossed, he nodded and kept walking. The staff took their cues from him. They were efficient, obedient, and utterly indifferent. Elara could have set herself on fire, and someone would have brought a bucket, put it out, and returned to their duties without comment. Mrs. Hartwell handed her ledgers, lists, schedules. The household runs on routine, Your Grace. Deviation causes problems. Elara spent her mornings reviewing accounts she didn't understand, her afternoons wandering the empty halls, her evenings eating alone. At night she lay in the too-hard bed, staring at the canopy, waiting for the knock that would signal Rowan's arrival. It didn't come. Not the first week, not the second. By the third week, she stopped expecting it. It was Bess who gave her the first real piece of information. The old Duchess, ma'am, His Grace's mother, she died 5 years ago. Heart, they said, but Bess glanced over her shoulder, lowering her voice. People say it was the loneliness that did it. The Duke's father, he wasn't a kind man, and His Grace, well, he learned from him. Elara absorbed this. What happened to the Duke's father? Died in a hunting accident. Some say the horse threw him. Some say he threw himself. And the Duke? Bess hesitated. He changed after, got colder, sent away most of the staff, let the estate fall apart. He doesn't care about it, ma'am. Doesn't care about much, far as I can tell. That night, Elara stood at her window, looking out at the dying gardens, and made a decision. If Rowan Blackthorne wanted to live in a tomb, that was his choice. But she'd be damned if she'd be buried with him. The next morning, she found the head gardener, or what was left of him. Thomas Greer was 70 if he was a day, bent like a question mark, hands gnarled from decades of work. Your Grace, he said, startled when she appeared in the greenhouse. I wasn't expecting, Mr. Greer, I want to restore the gardens. He blinked. The gardens, ma'am? All of them. The rose garden, the hedges, the fountain, everything. That's a year's work, ma'am, maybe more. And His Grace, he's never approved the budget. Then we'll start small. What can we do with what we have? Thomas stared at her like she'd sprouted wings. Then slowly, something flickered in his rheumy eyes. Hope, maybe. Or the memory of it. Well, he said slowly, the roses, some of the rootstock is still good. If we cut back the dead wood, clear the weeds, we might save a dozen bushes. Maybe 2. Then that's where we start. She spent the next 3 weeks in the gardens, her dresses caked with mud, her hands blistered. The staff watched from windows, whispering. Mrs. Hartwell made her disapproval known with icy silence. Rowan said nothing because Rowan was never there. But the roses responded. Slowly, grudgingly, they came back. And Elara learned something important. Things could survive, even in terrible conditions, if someone refused to let them die. It was late October when Rowan finally acknowledged her existence beyond a nod. She was in the library, a cavernous room she'd claimed as her own, reading by firelight when he appeared in the doorway. She looked up, startled. "Your Grace." "I've been informed you're redirecting household funds," he said without preamble. Elara set down her book. "I'm using the household discretionary budget, well within my authority. For gardening, yes." "Why?" She met his gaze. "Because someone should care about this place, since you clearly don't." The words hung in the air like a slap. For a moment she thought he'd explode. Instead, something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or anger so cold it looked like calm. "This estate," he said slowly, "is not a charity project. It's a business. The gardens are decorative, unnecessary. They're dying, so let them." "No." The word came out harder than she'd intended. Rowan's eyes narrowed. "No?" Elara stood. "You want me to manage this household? Fine, I'm managing it. The gardens are part of the household. They're coming back." "I didn't give you permission. I didn't ask for it." They stared at each other. The fire crackled. Outside, rain began to fall. Finally, Rowan turned. "Do what you want. Just stay out of my way." He left. Elara sat down, hands shaking. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a surrender either. November brought storms. The first one hit on a Tuesday, tearing shingles off the east wing and flooding the lower cellars. Elara spent the day coordinating repairs, directing servants, hauling buckets herself when there weren't enough hands. By evening, she was soaked and exhausted. Rowan appeared in the entrance hall as she was wringing out her skirts. He stopped short. "What happened to you?" "The storm. The cellars flooded. We got most of the water out." "We?" "The staff and I." He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. "You should have sent for the estate manager." "He was handling the roof. I handled the cellars." "That's not—" He stopped, shook his head. "You're the Duchess. You don't haul water." "Someone had to." "Not you." "Why not?" He had no answer for that, or if he did, he didn't give it. He just turned and walked away, leaving wet footprints on the marble. But the next morning, when Elara went to check the cellars, she found them fully drained and reinforced. Rowan's doing. He didn't mention it. Neither did she. December arrived with ice. The temperature dropped so low the fountain froze solid. The staff huddled near fireplaces. Supplies ran low. And then, 2 days before Christmas, a messenger arrived with news that made Mrs. Hartwell go pale. "What is it?" Elara asked. "The tenant families in the South Quarter, ma'am. 3 cottages collapsed under the snow. They're asking for shelter." Elara didn't hesitate. "Bring them here." "Your Grace, we don't have the space." "We have 20 empty rooms in the East Wing. We have space." Within hours, 15 people were brought in. Children, elderly, a pregnant woman. Elara had them settled in guest rooms, ordered hot food, sent for a doctor. The staff moved in controlled chaos, some resentful, others quietly approving. Rowan returned at midnight to find his home full of strangers. He found Elara in the kitchens, making tea for a crying child. "What?" he said, voice like frost. "Is this?" She looked up. "The South Quarter cottages collapsed. They needed shelter." "So you brought them here?" "Yes." "Without consulting me." "You weren't here to consult." His jaw tightened. "This is not a charity house, Elara." It was the first time he'd used her name. It should have felt like progress. Instead, it felt like a weapon. "These are your tenants," she said quietly. "Your people. They're dying out there. They should have built better houses. They built what they could afford, which is what you charged them." The kitchen went silent. Even the child stopped crying. Rowan stepped closer. "You're overstepping. I'm doing what's right." "Right?" He laughed, sharp and bitter. "You've been here 3 months, and you think you understand how this works? I understand that people are freezing to death while we have empty rooms and full cellars. Those cellars need to last until spring. Then we ration, we share, we survive together. That's not how—" That's exactly how. She stood, tired of looking up at him. You can throw them out tomorrow if you want, but tonight, they stay. She walked past him, heart hammering, waiting for him to stop her. He didn't. The Tennant family stayed through January. The pregnant woman gave birth in one of the guest rooms, a healthy boy. The elderly man helped Thomas with winter pruning. The children brought noise and chaos, and something the house hadn't heard in years, laughter. Rowan avoided them all. But Elara noticed things. Extra firewood appearing in the east wing, a doctor arriving without being summoned, food rations that somehow stretched further than they should have. He was helping, quietly, anonymously. She didn't mention it. February brought the second storm. This one was worse, a 3-day blizzard that buried the estate under 5 feet of snow. The main road became impassable. Supply wagons couldn't get through. The temperature inside the house dropped until they could see their breath. On the second day, the coal ran out. Mrs. Hartwell delivered the news with grim finality. We have enough for the kitchens and the nursery. Everything else goes cold. Elara made the rounds, checking on the Tennant families, the elderly, the children. Everyone was scared but trying not to show it. She found Rowan in his study, staring at maps. We need to make a decision, she said. He didn't look up. I'm aware. If we consolidate everyone into the main hall, we can heat one large space instead of multiple rooms. It'll be uncomfortable, but do it. She blinked. Just like that? You want permission? Fine. You have it. Do whatever you think is best. Rowan, I said do it, Elara. She left before he could see her hands shaking. They turned the main hall into a camp, mattresses on the floor, blankets strung as privacy curtains, fires in both hearths burning constantly. It was cramped, awkward, strange. It was also warmer. That night, Elara couldn't sleep. She wandered the hall, checking fires, adjusting blankets on sleeping children. Near the west hearth, she found Rowan sitting alone, staring into the flames. She almost turned back, then didn't. Can't sleep either? She asked quietly. He glanced at her. Too many people snoring. It might have been a joke, she wasn't sure. She sat down beside him, close enough to share the fire's warmth. They didn't speak. Outside, the wind howled like something dying. My father used to do this, Rowan said suddenly. Elara waited. When I was young, during bad winters, he'd bring tenant families into the house. My mother hated it, said it was beneath our station. They'd fight for days. He paused. After she died, he stopped. Said there was no point in keeping people alive if they were just going to disappoint you anyway. Elara's chest tightened. That's a terrible thing to teach a child. It's what he believed. Rowan's voice was flat. And after he died, I realized he was right. People let you down. They leave. They break. It's easier not to care. That's not easier, Elara said. That's just lonelier. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a moment she saw something raw in his eyes, something that looked like pain. Then he stood. Get some sleep, Elara. Morning comes early. He walked away. But she noticed he checked the fires before he left. The storm broke on the third day. By the time the roads cleared, Elara had brokered peace between 2 feuding tenant families, taught 3 children their letters, and convinced Mrs. Hartwell to smile. Once. The tenant families left with tears and promises to repay her kindness. The house felt cavernous again, but something had shifted. Rowan started appearing at dinner. He didn't say much, but he was there, present. Listening when she talked about the estate, the staff, the repairs needed for spring. One night he asked, "Why do you care so much about this place?" Elara considered the question. Because someone has to. And because... She paused. Because it's not dead yet. Neither am I. He studied her for a long moment, then almost too quiet to hear. No, you're not. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even a compliment. But it was something. Accessant. March arrived with mud and new problems. The estate manager delivered grim news. The winter had devastated their finances. Repairs, food, medical costs for the tenant families. It had drained their reserves. They were facing a choice: cut staff, raise rents, or sell land. "We're not raising rents," Elara said immediately. "Your Grace, with respect, we may not have a choice." "We're not raising rents." The estate manager looked at Rowan. Rowan looked at Elara. "What do you propose?" he asked. "We cut waste, consolidate staff roles. I can manage the household accounts. We don't need a separate bookkeeper. We postpone the East Wing repairs. We plant kitchen gardens and reduce food purchases. We find another way. That's not sustainable long term. It doesn't have to be, just long enough to get through this year." Rowan leaned back. "And if it doesn't work? Then we revisit. But we try this first." He nodded slowly. "All right." The estate manager looked like he'd been struck. "Your Grace?" "You heard the Duchess," Rowan said. "We do it her way." It was the first time he'd backed her publicly. Elara felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope. She crushed it immediately. April brought rain and revelation. Elara was in the gardens, her gardens now, everyone called them, when Rowan found her. She was on her knees in the mud, planting seedlings. "We need to talk," he said. She sat back on her heels. "About?" "London. There's a parliamentary session next month. I'm expected to attend." "So attend." "You'll come with me." It wasn't a question. "Rowan, I can't just leave." "The staff can manage. I need you there." "Why?" He hesitated, then, "Because they'll ask about you, about us, and I'd rather not lie." Something in his voice made her look up. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying—" He stopped, started again. "When we married, I told you this was a transaction. I meant it. I didn't want—" He broke off, frustrated. "I didn't want to care. About you. About any of this." Elara's heart was doing strange things. "And now? Now I'm realizing that's not working." The rain fell harder. Neither of them moved. "Elara, I don't know how to do this. Any of this. I don't know how to be—" He gestured vaguely. "Whatever it is you need." "I need you to try," she said quietly. "That's all. Just try." He looked at her, mud-stained, rain-soaked, impossibly stubborn, and something in his face cracked open. "Okay," he said. "I'll try." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. Elara stood, held out her muddy hand. Rowan stared at it. Then, slowly, he took it. They didn't kiss. They didn't embrace. They just stood there in the rain, holding hands like two people learning to walk for the first time. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for Elara Blackthorne, Duchess of a dying estate, survivor of a frozen marriage, that was more than enough. For now. London smelled like coal smoke and ambition. The carriage rattled through streets crowded with vendors, beggars, and gentlemen who stepped over both without looking down. Elara watched through the window, her stomach tight with something between excitement and dread. Beside her, Rowan sat reading correspondence, his face unreadable. They hadn't spoken much since leaving the estate 3 days ago. Not because of hostility, that would have been easier to navigate. This silence was different, careful, like two people trying not to spook a wild animal they'd accidentally cornered together. "We're staying at Blackthorn House," Rowan said without looking up. "It's smaller than the estate. The staff there doesn't know you." "Should I be concerned about that?" "They'll judge you. Everyone will." Elara smoothed her skirts. "They've been judging me since we married. I'm still here." He glanced at her then, something almost like approval in his eyes. "Fair point." Blackthorn House was a 3-story Georgian townhouse in Mayfair, elegant, cold, and clearly built to impress rather than comfort. The housekeeper, Mrs. Pembroke, was cut from the same cloth as Mrs. Hartwell, but sharper around the edges. She assessed Elara in one sweeping glance and found her wanting. "Your rooms are on the 2nd floor, Your Grace." Separate from His Grace's chambers, naturally. Naturally. Because even in London, in a house 1/10 the size of the estate, they couldn't share space. Elara followed a maid upstairs to a bedroom that was pretty and utterly impersonal. She sat on the bed and wondered, not for the first time, if she'd made a terrible mistake holding Rowan's hand in the rain. Hope was a dangerous thing. It made you forget how easily people could disappoint you. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Rowan entered, still in his traveling coat. "There's a dinner tomorrow night, Lord and Lady Ashworth. Small gathering, they said, but that means 20 people minimum." "I'll be ready." "They'll ask questions. About us. About why we've been absent from society." "What should I tell them?" He leaned against the doorframe. "The truth. That we've been managing the estate." "Will they believe that?" "Probably not. But it's better than the alternative." "Which is?" "That I married you out of desperation, and we can barely stand each other." Elara flinched despite herself. Rowan noticed. "I'm not saying that's true," he added quickly. "I'm saying that's what they'll assume if we don't present a united front." "A united front," she repeated, "like a military campaign." "Exactly like that." She almost laughed. "You're terrible at this." "At what?" "Pretending you care." He went still. "I'm not pretending." The words hung between them, fragile as glass. Elara wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it scared her. "Then what are you doing?" she asked quietly. "Trying. Like you said." He straightened. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be exhausting." He left before she could respond. The Ashworth dinner was exactly as awful as Elara had anticipated. 23 guests crammed into a dining room that comfortably seated 15. Conversations overlapped like competing orchestras. Lady Ashworth, a woman whose smile suggested she'd perfected the art of cruelty wrapped in politeness, held court at one end of the table while her husband dozed at the other. Elara was seated between a banking magnate who ignored her completely and a young viscount who stared at her bodice while pretending to discuss agriculture. "And how are you finding married life, Your Grace?" the viscount asked, his eyes never reaching her face. "Educational," Elara said. "I imagine the Duke keeps you quite busy." There was an implication there that made her skin crawl. Across the table, Rowan was deep in conversation with a member of Parliament, but his jaw had tightened. "The estate keeps us both busy," Elara said evenly. Lady Ashworth's voice cut through the chatter like a knife. "Tell us, Duchess, is it true you've been housing tenant families in the main residence?" The table went quiet. Elara set down her fork carefully. "During the winter storms, yes. Several cottages were damaged." "How very charitable." Lady Ashworth's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Though some might say it sets a dangerous precedent, blurring the lines between classes." "Some might say letting people freeze to death sets a worse one." A few guests coughed into their wine. The viscount beside her suddenly found his plate fascinating. "Spoken like someone unfamiliar with estate management," Lady Ashworth continued smoothly. "The lower classes require firm boundaries, Duchess. Kindness is often mistaken for weakness." "Then I'm happy to be mistaken." Rowan spoke before Lady Ashworth could respond. "My wife's management of the estate has been exemplary. Tenant satisfaction is at a 10-year high. Productivity has increased 20%. Because she's coddling them, because she's treating them like human beings," Rowan said, his voice like ice over steel, which apparently is a revolutionary concept. The table descended into uncomfortable silence. Elara felt her face burning. Lady Ashworth recovered first. "Of course. How progressive. I'm sure it's working wonderfully in your little corner of the country." She turned to another guest. "Lord Pembroke, tell us about your expedition to Egypt." The conversation moved on, but Elara noticed the glances, the whispers behind gloved hands. She'd been weighed, measured, and found unsuitable for polite society. Perfect. They left early, pleading fatigue. In the carriage, Rowan loosened his cravat. "That was a disaster," he said. "That was Tuesday." He looked at her. "You're not upset?" "I'm furious, but I'm used to it." She folded her hands. "People have been underestimating me my entire life. Lady Ashworth is just louder about it. She's influential. She'll spread rumors." "Let her. We're not here to make friends." "Then why are we here?" "Good question." Elara stared out the window at the dark streets. "You said you needed me. For what exactly?" Rowan was quiet for a long moment. "Parliament is debating new tenancy laws. They want to make it easier to evict tenants, raise rents without limitation. If it passes, Half the families on our estate will be homeless by winter. Elara's stomach dropped. Can you stop it? I'm one vote. Against men who see tenants as commodities. He rubbed his face. I thought if I brought you, if they saw what we've been doing, how it's working, maybe some of them would listen. They won't listen to me. I'm a woman. And worse, I'm a woman with opinions. I know. He looked at her. But maybe they'll listen to results. We have numbers, data, proof that treating people decently improves productivity and reduces unrest. You want to fight them with evidence. I want to fight them with the truth. Elara felt something shift in her chest. This was the man she'd seen in glimpses. The one who'd helped the tenant families, who'd reinforced the sellers, who'd stood up for her at dinner. He wasn't doing this for politics. He was doing it because it was right. Okay, she said. What do you need from me? The next week was a blur of meetings, dinners, and strategic conversations. Rowan introduced her to allies, progressive landowners, reform-minded MPs, even a few journalists sympathetic to tenant rights. Elara learned to smile through condescension, to present their estate's success as proof rather than theory, to turn every insult into an opportunity to prove people wrong. It was exhausting. It was also exhilarating. You're good at this, Rowan said one evening after a particularly contentious dinner debate. At being talked down to? At fighting back without losing your composure. Elara shrugged. I've had practice. They were in his study at Blackthorn House, a room that was slowly becoming their war room. Maps covered the desk, notes scattered across every surface. She'd stopped sleeping in her own room 3 nights ago, too wired from strategy sessions to care about propriety. We're making progress, Rowan said, reviewing his notes. Lord Fairfax is wavering. If we can get him, we might swing 5 more votes. What does he care about? Stability, profit, appearances? Then we show him how evictions create instability, how desperate people riot, how our approach prevents that. Rowan looked up. You think he'll listen? I think he'll listen to his own self-interest. We just have to frame it right. He smiled. Actually smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. Elara felt her breath catch. What? He asked. Nothing. You should smile more. It's unsettling, but not entirely terrible. He laughed, a short, surprised sound. High praise from the woman who told me I was terrible at pretending to care. You've improved. Have I? She held his gaze. You're trying. It shows. Something passed between them, something warm and dangerous and entirely inconvenient. Rowan stood abruptly. It's late. You should rest. Rowan? Good night, Elara. He left before she could finish. Elara stayed in the study, surrounded by papers and possibilities, and wondered when exactly she'd stopped trying to survive this marriage and started hoping it could be something more. Lord Fairfax agreed to meet them at his club. It was the kind of place that reeked of old money and older prejudices, leather chairs, cigar smoke, and portraits of men who'd built empires on other people's backs. Women weren't allowed inside naturally, so Elara waited in the carriage while Rowan went in to make his case. She lasted 20 minutes before deciding rules were meant to be broken. The doorman tried to stop her. Madam, ladies are not permitted. I'm the Duchess of Ashford. Unless you'd like to explain to my husband why you physically detained his wife, I suggest you step aside. She swept past him before he could recover. Inside, the club was exactly as terrible as she'd imagined. She found Rowan in a private room with Lord Fairfax, a portly man in his 60s who looked like he'd never missed a meal in his life. Your Grace, Fairfax sputtered as she entered. This is highly irregular. So is letting thousands of families starve because you're too comfortable to imagine their suffering, Elara said pleasantly. May I sit? Rowan's expression was somewhere between horror and admiration. Elara, I'm not here to disrupt. I'm here to answer Lord Fairfax's questions. You have questions, don't you, Lord Fairfax? The man blinked. Yes. His Grace claims your estate has increased productivity through, what did you call it? Humane management practices. That seems idealistic at best. It's practical. Healthy, housed workers are more productive than desperate ones. We've documented everything. Harvest yields, repair completion times, even illness rates. Every metric has improved. At what cost? Lower rents? Higher maintenance expenses? Short-term profit loss? You see? Unsustainable. Only if you define sustainability as quarterly profits. We're defining it as long-term stability. Our tenants aren't planning revolts. They're planning futures that's worth more than any immediate return. Fairfax leaned back. Pretty words, Duchess, but the reality is you're scared, Elara interrupted. You're scared that if you treat people decently, they'll expect it permanently. You're scared that kindness looks like weakness. You're scared that if the law changes to protect tenants, you'll lose control. That's absurd, is it? Because from where I'm sitting, the only people who oppose tenant protections are people who've been abusing the current system. The room went very quiet. Are you calling me abusive? Fairfax's face was turning purple. I'm saying the system is abusive, and you're defending it. Draw your own conclusions. Rowan stood. Elara, perhaps? No. She kept her eyes on Fairfax. You wanted to know if our approach works. It does. We have proof. The question isn't whether it's practical. The question is whether you care enough about human lives to try. Fairfax stared at her. Then, incredibly, he laughed. You're either very brave or very stupid, Duchess. Why not both? He laughed harder. Blackthorn, your wife is remarkable. Insufferable, but remarkable. He pulled out a cigar. Send me your documentation. All of it. I'll review it. That's all we ask, Rowan said quickly, before Elara could say something else provocative. They left the club together. In the carriage, Rowan turned to her. That was insane. It worked. You could have ruined everything, but I didn't. He shook his head. You're going to give me a heart condition. Better than dying of boredom. He smiled despite himself. Then, without warning, he took her hand. Not like in the garden, tentative and uncertain. This was deliberate. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For being you. For not backing down. He paused. For making me believe this might actually work. Elara squeezed his hand. We're not done yet. I know, but we're closer. They sat like that for the rest of the ride, hands intertwined, both pretending the gesture didn't mean everything. 2 days before the parliamentary vote, disaster struck. A messenger arrived at Blackthorn House with urgent news: fire at the estate. The South Quarter cottages, rebuilt after the winter storms, were gone. 3 families homeless. No casualties, miraculously, but the damage was catastrophic. Rowan read the message 3 times. We have to go back. The vote is in 2 days. We'll never make it. Elara's mind raced. You stay. I'll go. Absolutely not. Rowan, you need to be here for the vote. I can handle the estate. It's a 6-hour journey each way. Then I'll leave now and work through the night. She was already moving, calling for her maid. The tenants need someone there. You need to be here. It's the only way. He grabbed her arm. Elara, it's dangerous. The roads? I've survived worse than bad roads. I can't lose you. The words came out raw, unguarded. They stared at each other. You won't, she said. I'll come back, I promise. She left within the hour. The journey was hell. Rain turned the roads to mud. The carriage got stuck twice. By the time Elara reached the estate, she was soaked, exhausted, and running on pure stubbornness. The South Quarter was worse than she'd imagined. The cottages weren't just damaged, they were obliterated. Families huddled under makeshift shelters, children crying, parents hollow-eyed with shock. Elara rolled up her sleeves. Mrs. Hartwell, I need every spare room opened. Bess, gather blankets and hot food. Thomas, assess what materials we have for temporary repairs. Your Grace, we don't have the funds. Then we'll use credit. Figure it out. She spent the next 12 hours coordinating, housing families, calming children, sitting with a woman who'd lost everything and needed someone to witness her grief without trying to fix it. By dawn, everyone was sheltered. Temporary repairs were underway. and Elara was standing in the remains of a burned cottage, too tired to cry. That's when she found it. A candle, deliberately placed, and beside it, a scrap of fabric that didn't match anything the tenants owned. Someone had set this fire. She confronted the estate manager at noon. This wasn't an accident. He went pale. Your Grace, someone burned those cottages. Who? I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying. I'm stating. Those families were targeted. Why? He hesitated too long. Tell me, Elara said quietly, or I'll assume you were involved. It wasn't me. His voice shook. But there are people, landowners in the county, who think His Grace is setting a bad example, coddling tenants, making the rest of them look cruel by comparison. So they burned us out? I think they wanted to send a message, that your approach doesn't work, that kindness makes you vulnerable. Elara felt ice in her veins. Who? I can't. Names. Now. He gave her 3. All prominent landowners. All men who'd lose influence if Rowan's reforms succeeded. Thank you, Elara said. You're dismissed. Your Grace? You knew about this. You suspected. And you said nothing while families burned. She met his eyes. Pack your things. I want you gone by nightfall. She sent an urgent message to London. Rowan arrived 30 hours later, the vote still a day away. You fired the estate manager, he said. He was complicit. We have no proof. We have a pattern. And we have enemies. She showed him the evidence. The candle, the fabric, the names. Rowan's face went hard. This changes everything. Does it change the vote? It should. If people know our opposition is resorting to arson, they'll never believe it. They'll say we're making excuses. Then what do we do? Elara looked at the burned cottages, the families starting to rebuild. We win anyway. We show them that even when they try to destroy us, we come back stronger. How? I don't know yet. But we will. He pulled her close, right there in the ashes, not caring who saw. I meant it. I can't lose you. You won't, she said again. But this time, she wasn't entirely sure she could keep that promise. The vote was held on a gray Thursday morning. Rowan presented their evidence, their numbers, their proof that humane treatment worked. Elara sat in the gallery, surrounded by wives and daughters, who looked at her like she was something exotic and faintly dangerous. Lord Fairfax voted in their favor. So did 3 others they'd convinced. It wasn't enough. The bill passed. Tenant protections failed. In the carriage afterward, Rowan stared at nothing. I'm sorry, Elara said. I should have done more. You did everything you could. It wasn't enough. She took his hand. Then we find another way. We keep fighting. Against what? The entire system? If that's what it takes. He looked at her. You're serious. I'm always serious. For the first time since the vote, he almost smiled. I believe you. They rode in silence for a while. Then Rowan spoke again. When we get back to the estate, I want to expand the tenant protections anyway. I don't care if it's legal. I don't care if it costs us. We're doing it. We'll be outcasts. We already are. Elara leaned her head against his shoulder. Then I guess we're in good company. They returned to the estate to find something unexpected. The burned cottages had been rebuilt, not by hired workers, by the tenants themselves. Every family that could swing a hammer had contributed. They'd pooled resources, shared labor, created something stronger than what had burned. Thomas met them at the gates. They wanted to surprise you, Your Grace. Wanted to show you they weren't giving up. Elara walked through the new structures. They weren't perfect, but they were solid, built with determination and hope. That night, she and Rowan stood in the rebuilt square, surrounded by people who'd decided that kindness wasn't weakness after all. We lost the vote, Elara said quietly. Did we? Rowan looked at the cottages, the families, the community they'd built despite everything. Because it doesn't feel like losing. She slipped her hand into his. No, it doesn't. And for the first time since their wedding night, when he'd made it clear she was nothing but a transaction, Elara felt like she might actually have a home, not because the estate was beautiful, not because society accepted her, but because she'd found someone who looked at the world and saw the same possibility she did, someone who was finally, truly trying, someone who might actually be worth loving. But loving him would require trust, and trust would require truth. And the truth Elara hadn't told anyone was that she'd recognized one of the names the estate manager had given her, one of the men who'd ordered the fires, her own father. The letter arrived 3 days later. Elara recognized the handwriting before she broke the seal, her father's cramped, precise script that had signed away her childhood, her choices, and finally, her marriage. She read it standing at her bedroom window, the morning light making the words blur. My dearest daughter, I trust this finds you well. I hear troubling rumors from London about your husband's radical sympathies and your own unseemly involvement in estate matters. Remember your duty to family. The Witcom name cannot afford further scandal. I've taken the liberty of arranging a visit. We have much to discuss. Your devoted father. No mention of the fires. No acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just the same manipulation dressed up as paternal concern. Elara's hands shook. She crumpled the letter, then smoothed it out again. Evidence. She needed to keep evidence. A knock at the door made her jump. Come in. Rowan entered, still in his riding clothes, mud on his boots. We have a problem. Only one? We're improving. He didn't smile. 4 more landowners have filed formal complaints with the regional magistrate. They're claiming we're harboring vagrants, violating property standards, and, this is rich, endangering public morals. By housing people? By treating them like equals. He tossed a document on her desk. They're demanding an inspection. If we fail, they can petition to have our estate management rights revoked. Elara felt cold. They can do that? If they prove we're mismanaging, and with the right magistrate. He didn't finish. She showed him her father's letter. Rowan read it twice. He's coming here? Apparently. When? He doesn't say, which means soon. They looked at each other, the same realization hitting simultaneously. He's coordinating with them, Rowan said slowly. Your father and the other landowners, the inspection, his visit, it's all planned. They're going to destroy us. They're going to try. Elara walked to the window. Below, tenant families were working the fields, children playing near the rebuilt cottages. Her gardens, months of brutal labor, were finally blooming. Everything she'd built, everything they'd built together, was about to be weaponized against them. We need to prepare, she said. For what? They hold all the cards. No, they hold the legal cards. We hold something better. Which is? She turned. The truth. And people who'll fight for it. Chuck. The magistrate arrived on a Tuesday with an entourage that included 2 clerks, a surveyor, and 3 of the complaining landowners. Elara recognized one immediately, Lord Cunningham, a man who'd tried to proposition her at a dinner party and taken her refusal as a personal insult. Your Grace, he said with false warmth, what a pleasure. Lord Cunningham. She didn't curtsy. To what do we owe this invasion? The magistrate, a thin man named Pemberton, cleared his throat. Hardly an invasion, madam, a routine inspection to ensure compliance with regional standards. Standards that have never been enforced before. Times change. Pemberton opened his ledger. Shall we begin? They spent 6 hours combing through the estate. Pemberton documented everything. The tenant cottages, the shared gardens, the communal kitchen Elara had established. He measured, counted, recorded. The landowners followed like vultures, pointing out perceived violations. These cottages are too close together, Cunningham noted. Fire hazard. They're the same distance apart as your tenant housing, Elara countered. I measured. These families are receiving subsidized food, another landowner said. That's not economically viable. It's completely viable. Our ledgers prove it. Ledgers can be falsified. Rowan stepped forward. Are you accusing my wife of fraud? I'm suggesting her bookkeeping may be optimistic. Then audit them. Every entry, every expense. We have nothing to hide. Pemberton made notes. We'll require full financial records, going back 2 years. You'll have them by morning, Elara said. By the time they left, She was shaking with suppressed rage. Rowan found her in the library, surrounded by account books. "This is my fault," she said without looking up. "How is any of this your fault? I pushed too hard, changed too much too fast. If I'd been more careful, they would have found another excuse." He sat beside her. "Elara, you can't blame yourself for their cruelty." "Can't I? My father taught me early. People hate change, hate being shown they're wrong. I should have been smarter." "You were brave. There's a difference." She finally met his eyes. "Brave gets you killed. Or it gets you free." Before she could respond, Bess burst in. "Your Grace, there's someone at the gate. Says he's family." Elara's stomach dropped. "Did he give a name?" "Witcom, ma'am. Your father." Edward Witcom looked older than Elara remembered. Grayer, but his eyes held the same calculating coldness they always had. "Elara, you look well." He kissed her cheek. She endured it. "Father, this is unexpected." "Is it?" I wrote. "You said you'd visit, not invade during a hostile inspection." He smiled. "Coincidence." Liar, but she kept her face neutral. "Come in. I'll have tea prepared." They sat in the drawing room, Elara, her father, and Rowan, who'd positioned himself like a guard dog. Edward assessed him with barely concealed disdain. "Duke Blackthorn, I've heard much about your progressive initiatives." "Have you?" "The whole county is talking. Unusual management practices. Coddling the lower classes." He sipped his tea. "Dangerous precedent." "Dangerous for whom?" Elara asked. "For everyone. Social order exists for a reason, daughter. When you disrupt it, consequences follow." "Like burning cottages?" Edward didn't flinch. "I heard about that unfortunate incident. Tragic, but perhaps instructive." "Instructive," Elara repeated flatly. "It demonstrates the volatility of your approach. When you raise expectations, people become ungrateful, demanding. The fire was probably set by one of your own tenants seeking more handouts." Rowan stood. "Get out." "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me. Leave. Now." Edward looked at Elara. "Is this how you allow your husband to treat your family?" "My family tried to burn down my home," Elara said quietly. "Rowan's being generous by only asking you to leave." "You have no proof." "I have the estate manager's testimony. I have the names. Yours included." She stood. "I know what you did. The question is whether I report it." Edward's mask slipped. Just for a second, she saw rage. "You wouldn't dare." "Wouldn't I?" "I'm your father. You sold me to pay your debts. You've undermined me at every turn. You just threatened my home and the people I'm responsible for." Her voice was steel. "You stopped being my father the day you made me a transaction." Edward set down his teacup with deliberate care. "You've become quite bold, Elara. Marriage has changed you." "Marriage gave me options. I'm using them." "Options?" He laughed. "You think you have power here? You're a woman playing at estate management while your husband's reputation crumbles. The inspection will fail. You'll be removed from authority. And then what?" Rowan asked. "You'll swoop in to save us? Generous of you, considering you orchestrated the crisis." "I'm trying to save my daughter from her own foolishness." "No," Elara said. "You're trying to save yourself. If our approach succeeds, if we prove that treating people decently is profitable, your entire operation falls apart. Every tenant you've exploited will demand better. You can't allow that." Edward stood. "You're making a mistake." "I've made plenty. Believing you ever cared about me was the biggest." He walked to the door, then turned. "The inspection will destroy you, and when it does, don't come begging for help." "I wouldn't dream of it." He left. Elara waited until she heard the front door close before her knees gave out. Rowan caught her. "I've got you." "He's going to win," she whispered. "He always wins." "Not this time." "You don't know him." "I know you. And you're stronger than he is." She wanted to believe him, wanted it desperately, but her father had spent 20 years breaking her down, teaching her she was worthless, replaceable, a burden. Those lessons didn't disappear just because she'd found someone who disagreed. They worked through the night preparing for the final inspection. Every ledger, every receipt, every documented improvement. Elara's eyes burned from reading by candlelight. Rowan had fallen asleep at the desk, head on a stack of papers. She was about to wake him when Bess appeared. "Ma'am, you need to come, now." The urgency in her voice sent Elara running. The South Quarter was on fire again. Not the cottages this time, the fields. Someone had set the newly planted crops ablaze. Families were frantically hauling water, but the fire was spreading fast. "Get everyone back!" Elara shouted. "It's not worth dying for." "It's our harvest, ma'am," one of the men yelled. "We lose this, we starve." She knew. She knew, and there was nothing she could do. The fire was too big, too fast. They'd lose everything. Then Rowan was beside her, covered in soot. "We need to create a fire break, cut off the fuel before it reaches the buildings." "We don't have time. We make time. Get everyone with tools, now." They worked like demons, cutting, digging, tearing up earth to create a barrier the fire couldn't cross. Elara's hands bled. Her lungs screamed from smoke. But she kept going because everyone else was, because stopping meant surrender. The fire hit the brake and stalled. For a terrible moment, it seemed like it might jump. Then the wind shifted. The flames died. They'd saved the buildings, but 3/4 of the crops were gone. Elara stood in the smoking ruins as dawn broke, staring at months of work reduced to ash. Around her, tenant families were crying. She wanted to cry too, wanted to scream, wanted to give up. Instead, she started counting what was left. The final inspection was held the next day. Elara looked like death. They all did, covered in soot, exhausted, running on rage and stubbornness. Pemberton arrived with his entourage and stopped short at the sight of the burned fields. "What happened here?" "Arson," Rowan said flatly. "Second incident in a month." "Unfortunate. However, it doesn't change our mandate." Pemberton consulted his ledger. "We'll need to assess the impact on your financial viability." "The financial records you requested," Elara interrupted, presenting a stack of books. "Every transaction, every expense, every penny accounted for. 2 years' worth." Pemberton's clerk spent an hour reviewing them. Elara watched his face fall as he found nothing wrong. The numbers worked. Every unorthodox decision was documented, justified, profitable. "The housing arrangements," Lord Cunningham tried. "Surely they violate density standards." "They meet every legal requirement," Rowan said. "We triple-checked. The communal resources are privately funded through the estate's discretionary budget, completely legal." Pemberton looked increasingly uncomfortable. "There must be some violation." "There isn't," Elara said. "Because we've been careful, meticulous. We knew you'd come looking for excuses to shut us down, so we made sure there weren't any." "The fire damage doesn't change our viability. We have reserves. We'll replant." "With what funds?" "Ours." Rowan stepped forward. "And before you ask, yes, we can prove it. The estate is profitable. Our approach works. You have no legal grounds to remove our management rights." Pemberton looked at the landowners. They looked back, furious and impotent. "This inspection is concluded," Pemberton said finally. "We'll file our report within the week." They left. Elara waited until they were out of sight before her legs gave out. Rowan caught her again. "We did it," he said. "We survived. That's not the same as winning. It's close enough for today." The report came back clean. Grudgingly, barely, but clean. The landowner's petition was denied. Elara should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt hollowed out. The fires had taken their toll. The fields would recover, but slowly. Food would be tight. Morale was shattered. And her father's words kept echoing. "Don't come begging for help." She was in the library when Rowan found her. "We need to talk." "About what?" He sat across from her. "I want to sell the London house." Elara looked up. "What?" "We need capital. For replanting, repairs, reserves. The London house is worth £20,000. We don't need it." "Rowan, that's your family's." "It's a building. This," he gestured at the estate, "is real. These people are real. I'd rather invest in something that matters. Society will crucify you." Let them. I'm tired of caring what they think. Elara felt something crack open in her chest. You're serious. Completely. Unless you object. I don't object. I'm just, as she trailed off, I'm not used to someone choosing this, choosing us. Get used to it. He took her hand. Elara, I know I've been a disaster, cold, absent, terrible at everything that matters, but you've shown me something I thought was impossible. What's that? That people can change, that hope isn't weakness, that love. He stopped. Elara's breath caught. What about love? I'm trying to say I love you. I'm doing it badly, but I'm trying. She stared at him. This man who'd been ice on their wedding day, who'd made her feel like a purchased solution, who'd slowly, painfully learned to be human. Say it again, she whispered. I love you. One more time. I love you, Elara Blackthorn. I love your stubbornness and your courage and the way you refuse to let anything die, including me. She kissed him, finally, desperately, like she'd been drowning and he was air. When they broke apart, she was crying. I love you too, she said. Even though you're still terrible at this. He laughed. Actually, laughed. I'll keep practicing. They sold the London house, used the money to replant, repair, expand. Word spread. Other estates started asking questions. How did the Blackthorn approach work? Could they implement it? Elara and Rowan became reluctant reformers. They hosted visits, shared their methods, proved that profit and humanity weren't mutually exclusive. It wasn't easy. They had enemies. The landowners who'd tried to destroy them didn't forgive. Edward Witcom sent periodic letters full of venom disguised as concern. Society whispered and sneered, but the estate thrived. And Elara, the overlooked daughter, the purchased bride, the woman everyone expected to fail, became known as the Duchess, who'd changed everything. It was late autumn when the real crisis hit. A rider arrived at dawn with news from London. Parliament was reconvening. The tenant protection laws they'd fought for and lost were being debated again. But this time, there was opposition from an unexpected source. A coalition of landowners had presented their own bill, one that would make evictions easier, cap wages, and criminalize disruption of social order, code for anything resembling reform. If it passed, everything they'd built would become illegal. They're retaliating, Rowan said, staring at the letter. They can't beat us locally, so they're changing the law. Can they get the votes? If my father's old allies support them? Yes. Elara felt ice in her veins. We have to fight this. How? We're two people against an entire class of entrenched power. Then we make noise. We bring the tenants. We bring proof. We make it impossible to ignore. Elara, they'll never let tenants testify before Parliament, so we find another way. Her mind was racing. What if we go public? Newspapers, pamphlets. We tell our story everywhere until people can't pretend they don't know. That's radical. Everything we've done is radical. At least this way, if we fail loudly. Rowan looked at her, this woman who'd been forced into his life and somehow become the center of it. All right, we go loud. They spent 2 weeks preparing, writing accounts, gathering testimonials, finding sympathetic journalists. It was risky. If they failed, the backlash would be brutal. The night before they left for London, Elara stood in her gardens. The roses were blooming despite everything, despite the fires and the fights and the fear. Rowan found her there. Second thoughts? He asked. Thousands. But I'm going anyway. We could still back out, live quietly, survive. I'm tired of just surviving. He pulled her close. Me too. They stood there, wrapped in each other, while the autumn wind scattered petals around them. Tomorrow, they'd go to war. Tonight, they'd hold each other and pretend the world wasn't trying to crush them. London was colder than Elara remembered. They'd brought 15 tenants with them, families who'd volunteered to share their stories. Finding places to stay had been a nightmare. Most boarding houses wouldn't accept servants. They'd ended up in a cramped inn on the outskirts, all of them packed together like refugees, which, Elara supposed, they were. The first newspaper interview was with The Morning Chronicle, a progressive paper known for controversial coverage. The journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Reed, listened to their story with growing interest. You're saying landowners are actively sabotaging you? We have evidence, Elara said. Testimony, documentation. And you want me to publish this? We want you to publish the truth. Catherine leaned back. Your Grace, if I run this story, you'll become the most hated woman in England. Among your own class, at least. I'm already hated. Might as well make it count. The story ran 3 days later, front page, complete with testimonials from tenants, financial records proving their approach worked, and a blistering editorial about the hypocrisy of the ruling class. The response was immediate and vicious. Within 24 hours, Elara and Rowan were denounced in every conservative paper. They were called radicals, criminals, traitors to their class. Lady Ashworth published an op-ed calling Elara a dangerous influence on decent society. But something else happened too. Letters started arriving from farmers, workers, shopkeepers, people who'd read their story and recognized themselves in it, people who were tired of being crushed. We're not alone, Elara said, reading through them. No, Rowan agreed, but we've made powerful enemies. The enemies struck 2 days before the parliamentary vote. Elara was leaving the inn when 3 men blocked her path. She didn't recognize them, but she recognized the type. Hired muscle, paid to intimidate. The Duchess of Ashford, one said, we have a message from concerned citizens. I'm not interested. He grabbed her arm. You should be. Stop the newspaper campaign. Withdraw your support for the tenant bill. Go back to your estate and keep quiet. Or what? Or accidents happen. Fires, falls. Would be a shame if something happened to your husband. Fear spiked through her, but under it, rage, white hot and clarifying. Let go of me. Not until you understand. She drove her heel into his instep and slammed her elbow into his throat. He dropped, gasping. His companions lunged. Elara dodged one, caught the other's wrist, and twisted until something cracked. By the time help arrived, all 3 men were on the ground, and Elara was shaking so hard her teeth rattled. Rowan found her in their room, hands wrapped in bandages. They threatened you, she said. They said they'd hurt you if I didn't back down. He knelt in front of her. Are you all right? I broke someone's wrist. Good. She laughed. It came out slightly hysterical. This is insane. We're being threatened by thugs because we tried to help people. Yes. We should stop. We should go home and pretend none of this happened. Do you want to? She met his eyes. No, I want to burn their whole world down. Then let's burn it. Chuck. The vote was held on a freezing December morning. Elara and Rowan sat in the gallery, surrounded by tenants who'd risked everything to be there. Below, members of Parliament debated the bill. The speeches were predictable, conservatives warning about social decay, progressives arguing for basic humanity. Then someone unexpected stood. Lord Fairfax. I've reviewed the evidence presented by the Duke and Duchess of Ashford, he said. I've examined their estate's financial records, I've spoken with their tenants, and I've concluded that their approach is not only humane, it's profitable. Murmurs erupted. Furthermore, Fairfax continued, I've learned that the opposition to this bill is being led by landowners who've actively sabotaged the Blackthorns estate through arson and intimidation. I have testimony, I have names, and I'm submitting them to the authorities for investigation. The chamber exploded. Elara grabbed Rowan's hand. Did he just... He did. The vote was called. 15-10 in favor of tenant protections. They'd won. The celebration was short-lived. That night, back at the inn, a fire broke out. Started in the kitchen, spread fast. By the time they evacuated, half the building was gone. No one was killed. But it was close. Elara stood in the street, watching the inn burn, and felt something break inside her. She'd fought so hard, given everything, and still, they kept coming. We can't keep doing this, she said numbly. Rowan pulled her close. We won the vote, and they'll keep coming. They'll burn everything we touch until we give up or die. Then we fight back. How? They're everywhere. They have power, money, influence. We have nothing. We have each other, he said. And we have people who believe in us. That's not nothing. She wanted to believe him, but she was so tired. Elara. He tilted her face up. I need you to listen. I love you. I will not let them destroy you. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, we're going to win. You can't promise that. Watch me." Before she could respond, one of the tenants ran up. "Your Grace, they found something in the fire. You need to see." They followed him back to the smoking ruins. The fire marshal was holding a piece of fabric, expensive fabric, with the Witcom family crest embroidered on it. Elara stared at it. Then she started laughing. It wasn't a happy sound. "He's escalating," she said. "My father, he's done with subtlety." "This is evidence," Rowan said. "We can have him arrested." "He'll deny it. Say it was stolen. He's been doing this my entire life, leaving just enough plausible deniability to escape consequences." "Then what do we do?" Elara looked at the burning building, the scared tenants, the future they'd tried to build going up in smoke, and made a decision. "We go to war, real war. We expose everyone involved. We drag every name, every crime into the light, and we don't stop until they're finished." "That's dangerous." "Good. I'm tired of being careful." Rowan studied her face. "You're sure? I'm done being scared. They want to break me? Fine. Let them try." She turned to the gathered tenants. "Anyone who wants to leave, go. This is going to get worse before it gets better. I won't blame you." No one moved. "We're with you, Your Grace," one woman said. Others nodded. Elara felt something fierce and terrifying bloom in her chest. "Then let's show them what happens when you corner people with nothing left to lose." The next morning, they went to every newspaper in London. Elara told them everything: the fires, the threats, her father's involvement. Rowan provided documentation. The tenants shared their stories. By noon, the scandal was everywhere. By evening, warrants were being issued. And by midnight, Edward Witcom was fleeing London ahead of charges for conspiracy to commit arson and attempted murder. Elara watched him go from the window of a borrowed room, Rowan's arms around her. "It's not over," she said. "No, but it started." She turned in his arms. "I'm terrified." "Me too. But we're doing this anyway." "Absolutely." She kissed him. Hard and desperate and full of hope she didn't quite believe in yet. Outside, the city burned with rumors of scandal. Inside, two people who'd been forced together by circumstance held each other and prepared for the battle ahead. They'd survived winter. They'd survived fires. They'd survived each other. Now they just had to survive the war they'd started. And somewhere in the darkness, Edward Witcom watched the city that had turned against him and swore revenge. Edward Witcom's flight from London lasted exactly 9 hours. He made it as far as Dover before constables intercepted him at the docks, evidence tucked into his coat like a confession. The newspapers had a field day. "Prominent landowner flees arson charges," screamed the Chronicle. The Times was less restrained. Witcom caught red-handed, literally. Elara learned about it over breakfast in a cramped coffeehouse near Parliament. Catherine Reed, the journalist who'd broken the original story, slid a morning edition across the table. "Your father's being held without bail," Catherine said. "Magistrate cited flight risk." Elara stared at the headline. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt hollow. What happens now? Trial. Probably 3 months out. If convicted, he's looking at prison time, 10 years minimum. Good. Catherine raised an eyebrow. No hesitation? Would you hesitate if your father tried to burn you alive? Fair point. Catherine pulled out her notebook. The other landowners are scrambling. 2 have already issued public apologies. Lord Cunningham claims he was misled. It's pathetic, really. They're saving themselves, Rowan said. He'd been silent until now, watching Elara's face. Rats abandoning ship. Which means we've won, Catherine said. Won what? Elara asked. My father's arrested, but the system that enabled him is still intact. Those men are apologizing because they got caught, not because they've changed. So what do you want to do about it? Elara looked at the newspaper. Her father's face stared back, defiant even in custody. She thought about every time he'd told her she was worthless, every calculation that had led to her marriage, every fire he'd set to protect his own power. I want to make sure this never happens again, she said quietly. Not to me. Not to anyone. Catherine leaned forward. I'm listening. Mom. The The plan took shape over the next week. They'd won the legislative battle. Now they needed to change the culture. Elara proposed something radical, a public forum where tenants could share their stories directly, not filtered through nobility or journalists, raw, unvarnished truth. You'll be crucified, Catherine warned. Giving common people a platform, society will lose their minds. Let them, Elara said. I'm tired of fighting politely. Rowan was less certain. Elara, if this backfires, we'll lose every ally we have. We don't have allies. We have people too afraid to oppose us publicly. That's not the same thing. Then what's the goal? To make it impossible to ignore, to put faces and names to the suffering, to force people to choose sides. He studied her. You've changed. Is that a problem? No, it's terrifying, but no. They held the forum in a rented hall near Covent Garden, the only venue that would take them. Elara expected maybe 50 people. 300 showed up. Tenants, workers, servants. People who'd never been given a voice suddenly had one. They spoke about evictions, starvation wages, children dying from preventable diseases. Some cried, some raged. All of them were heard. Elara stood at the back, watching. Rowan found her there. This is extraordinary, he said. This is dangerous. Same thing lately. A woman approached them, middle-aged, work-worn, eyes bright with something between hope and fury. Your Grace, I wanted to thank you. For what? For this. For letting us speak. My husband, he died last winter. Landlord raised our rent, we couldn't pay, got evicted. He froze to death in a ditch. Her voice cracked. Nobody cared. But you're making them listen. Elara felt her throat tighten. I'm sorry about your husband. Don't be sorry. Be angry. That's what we need. People angry enough to change things. After she left, Elara turned to Rowan. We're really doing this. Apparently. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Story of our lives. She almost smiled. The backlash was immediate and vicious. Conservative papers called the forum mob rule disguised as reform. Society matrons organized protests. Lady Ashworth published another editorial, this one explicitly calling for the Blackthorns to be stripped of their titles. They're scared, Catherine said during their next meeting. That's why they're screaming. Scared of what? Elara asked. Of you, of what you represent. If a duchess can side with tenants over landowners, the whole hierarchy cracks. Good. It should crack. But the attacks took their toll. Invitations dried up. Former allies crossed the street to avoid them. The remaining staff at Blackthorn House in London quit, citing moral objections. Only Mrs. Pembroke stayed, grim and disapproving, but loyal. I don't agree with what you're doing, she told Elara one morning, but you're still the Duchess. That means something. Does it? More than you know. Elara didn't believe her, but she appreciated the sentiment. The real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after the forum, a delegation arrived at Blackthorn House. 5 landowners from the northern counties, men Elara had never met. They asked for a private meeting. Rowan was suspicious. Could be a trap. Could be an opportunity. They met in the drawing room. The landowners looked uncomfortable, like they'd entered enemy territory. Their spokesman, a stout man named Lord Pemberton, no relation to the magistrate, cleared his throat. Your Grace, your Graces, we've come to discuss your tenant management approach. What about it? Rowan asked. We want to implement it on our estates. Silence. You're serious, Elara said finally. Completely. We've reviewed your financial records, the ones published in the Chronicle. Your profits haven't decreased. In some areas, they've increased, and you've had zero labor unrest. While our estates are facing strikes and sabotage, another landowner added, our tenants read about what you're doing. They want the same. So this is self-preservation, Elara said. Call it what you want. We need help. Rowan leaned back. And if we refuse? Then we'll muddle through on our own and probably fail. But we're asking, which 3 months ago we would have died before doing. Elara looked at Rowan. He looked back. An entire conversation happening in silence. We'll help, Elara said. On one condition. Which is? You publicly support the tenant protection laws, all of you. No hedging, no private opposition, full endorsement. Pemberton winced. That'll cost us socially. It's already costing you financially. Choose. He exchanged glances with the others. All right. We agree. After they left, Rowan poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Did that just happen? I think so. We've created a movement. We've created survival tactics. They're following because they have no choice. Does it matter if the outcome is the same? Elara sipped her drink. Ask me in a year. Word spread. Within a month, 12 estates had adopted their approach. Within 2, 30. The Chronicle ran a series called The Blackthorn Effect, documenting the changes. Tenant satisfaction increased. Productivity rose. Most shocking, profits stabilized or improved. The model worked, but not everyone was convinced. A coalition of conservative landowners, led by Lord Cunningham despite his earlier apology, began organizing resistance. They called themselves the Property Rights Alliance. Their platform was simple: traditional hierarchy or chaos. They held rallies, published pamphlets, funded opposition candidates for parliament, and they targeted Elara specifically. The Duchess, read one particularly vicious broadsheet, is a woman who has forgotten her place. She meddles in men's business, elevates the unworthy, and threatens the natural order. She must be stopped. Rowan wanted to sue for libel. Elara stopped him. Don't, she said. It makes us look weak. They're calling you a threat to civilization. They're scared. Good. Scared people make mistakes. He didn't look convinced, but he backed down. The mistakes came faster than Elara expected. Cunningham organized a protest outside Blackthorn House, concerned citizens demanding the Duchess step down from estate management. 200 people showed up. So did 300 counter-protesters, tenants from across the region, workers from London, families who'd benefited from the reforms. They surrounded Cunningham's group, not violently but unmistakably, a human wall of opposition. Elara watched from the window, heart in her throat. They're here for you, Rowan said quietly. They're here for themselves. I'm just the excuse. Same thing now. The protest dissolved without violence. Cunningham left red-faced and sputtering about mob rule. But something had shifted. People were choosing sides, and more were choosing Elara's than Cunningham's. Edward Witcom's trial began in late February. The courtroom was packed, journalists, nobles, commoners, all jostling for seats. Elara sat in the front row, Rowan beside her. Her father was brought in wearing chains. He looked diminished, smaller somehow. Or maybe she'd just gotten bigger. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Evidence of the fires, testimony from the estate manager, financial records showing payments to known arsonists. It was damning. Edward's defense was predictable. He'd been framed. Jealous rivals had fabricated evidence. He was a victim of his daughter's radical politics. The Duchess, his lawyer argued, has created an environment of paranoia and accusation. My client is innocent. He's simply a concerned father trying to protect his daughter from herself. Elara felt Rowan tense beside her. She put a hand on his knee. Don't, she whispered. He's baiting us. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Witness after witness confirmed Edward's involvement. The evidence was overwhelming. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Lady Margaret Ashworth. She took the stand looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Under oath, she admitted that Edward had approached her months ago, asking her to use her influence to undermine the Blackthorns. He said his daughter had become dangerous, Lady Ashworth testified, that she was ruining his family's reputation. He wanted me to isolate her socially. And did you? The prosecutor asked. Yes, I organized the smear campaign, the editorials, the social boycott. I thought I was doing the right thing. She looked at Elara. I was wrong. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Edward's lawyer tried to recover. Lady Ashworth, were you coerced? No, I'm testifying voluntarily, because I've seen what the Duchess has accomplished, and I've realized that defending men like Edward Witcom makes me complicit in their crimes. It was over. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Edward was sentenced to 12 years in prison. As they led him away, he looked at Elara one last time. She met his gaze and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No grief. Just the quiet closing of a door she'd been trying to shut her entire life. Outside the courthouse, Catherine Reed was waiting. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Empty," Elara said, "but free." "That's a hell of a quote. Can I use it?" "Use whatever you want. I'm done hiding." Spring came to the estate like a resurrection. The fields they'd replanted were growing. The cottages had been reinforced and expanded. Children played in the gardens Elara had saved. It looked like hope. Rowan found her by the fountain, finally repaired, water flowing clear. "Letter from Parliament," he said. "They want you to testify about estate management reform." "Me specifically?" "You specifically. Seems you've become an authority." Elara laughed. It still felt strange. "Authority on what? Surviving people who want you dead?" "On proving that change is possible. That's rarer than you think." She took the letter, read it twice. "They'll eat me alive." "Probably." "I'll do it anyway." "I know." He pulled her close. They stood there, wrapped together, watching the water flow. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it." "Did what?" "Change things. Not everything. Not even most things. But something." Elara thought about the tenant families rebuilding, the estates adopting their model, the laws protecting people who'd had no protection, her father in prison where he belonged. "Yeah," she said. "I guess we did." The testimony was scheduled for May. Elara spent weeks preparing, reviewing every detail of their approach. Catherine helped, drilling her on potential questions. Rowan handled logistics. The night before they left for London, Elara couldn't sleep. She stood at her window looking out at the estate. Her estate now, in every way that mattered. A knock at the door. "Come in." Rowan entered carrying 2 glasses of wine. "Thought you might need this." "I need sleep." "That too." He handed her a glass. "Nervous?" "Terrified. They're going to ask me things I don't know. Point out flaws I can't defend. Expose me as what? As someone who got lucky. Someone who doesn't actually know what she's doing." Rowan set down his glass and took her hands. "Elara, look at me." She did. "You are the smartest, toughest, most competent person I've ever met. You've survived things that would have destroyed anyone else. You've built something real from nothing. You know exactly what you're doing. You're biased. Completely. Doesn't make it less true." She kissed him, soft and lingering. "Thank you." "For what?" "For believing in me when I couldn't." Always. Okay. Parliament was exactly as intimidating as Elara remembered. She stood before a committee of 12 men, lords, MPs, advisors. They regarded her with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. The chairman, Lord Halifax, spoke first. "Duchess Blackthorne, thank you for appearing. We have questions about your estate management practices." "I'm happy to answer." "Let's begin with the financial aspect. Your critics claim your approach is unsustainable. How do you respond?" "By showing them our ledgers. We're profitable, more so than under traditional management. Yet you've reduced rents and increased productivity. Healthy, stable workers produce more. It's not complicated." "Some would argue you're creating dependency, that tenants should succeed on their own merits. Hard to succeed when you're starving. We're not creating dependency. We're removing barriers." A conservative MP jumped in. "Barriers that have existed for centuries. Why change now?" "Because they're unjust. And because maintaining unjust systems eventually leads to collapse. Ask France." Murmurs ran through the committee. Halifax frowned. "That's inflammatory, Duchess." "It's factual. Revolutions happen when suffering becomes unbearable. We're trying to prevent that. By coddling the lower classes? By treating them like human beings." The questioning went on for hours. They challenged every decision, every expense, every philosophical foundation. Elara answered each one, backed by data and testimony and raw determination. Finally, Halifax called a recess. Elara stumbled outside, exhausted. Rowan was waiting with water. "How bad?" he asked. "Brutal, but I'm still standing." "That's my girl." They reconvened an hour later. Halifax looked uncomfortable. "Duchess, we've reviewed your testimony and supporting materials. We have one final question." "Ask it." "Oh, why should we trust you? A woman with no formal training in economics or law, advocating for radical change." Elara took a breath. "You shouldn't trust me. Trust the evidence. Trust the tenants who've gone from starvation to stability. Trust the estates implementing our model and seeing results. Trust mathematics over tradition. And if we can't, then you're not actually interested in solutions. You're interested in maintaining power, which is your choice. But history won't be kind to you." Silence. Then Lord Fairfax, the same man who'd voted for them months ago, spoke up. "I move that we recommend adoption of the Blackthorn model as optional best practice for estate management. Voluntary implementation with government support for interested landowners." "Seconded," another voice said. The vote was 8-4 in favor. Elara felt her knees go weak. Rowan caught her elbow. "You did it," he whispered. "We did it." Halifax gavelled the session closed. "The recommendation will go to Parliament next month. Duchess, the committee thanks you for your time and candor." As they left, several committee members approached her. Not to congratulate, that would have been too generous, but to ask questions. Real questions about implementation, challenges, solutions. They were taking her seriously. "What?" The news spread fast. Within days, the Chronicle ran the headline, "Parliament endorses Blackthorn model." Conservative papers were less enthusiastic. Dangerous precedent set by radical Duchess. But even they couldn't deny the committee's decision. Letters poured in, landowners asking for guidance, tenants thanking her, critics calling her everything from a savior to a threat to civilization. Elara read them all, the good and the terrible. She wanted to remember what this felt like, the moment when everything changed. Catherine Reed came to interview her one last time. "How does it feel?" Catherine asked. "To have won?" "I haven't won. I've just survived long enough to see progress." "That's not nothing." "No, it's not." "What's next?" Elara looked out at the estate, the gardens blooming, the cottages standing firm, the people who'd fought beside her building lives they'd never thought possible. "We keep going. There's still so much to fix." "You're not tired?" "Exhausted, but too stubborn to stop." Catherine laughed. "The unbreakable Duchess. That's what they're calling you." "I'm not unbreakable. I've broken 100 times. But you kept putting yourself back together. Didn't have a choice. We always have a choice. You chose to fight. That's what makes you remarkable." After Catherine left, Elara found Rowan in the library. He was reviewing estate plans, making notes. "We need to expand the school," he said without looking up. "More families means more children. We can't keep cramming them into one room." "Agreed." "And the North Quarter needs irrigation repairs before summer." "Rowan," he looked up. "Can we just stop? For one night? Can we just be?" He set down his pen. "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know. Something normal. Something that doesn't involve fighting or planning or surviving." He stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me." "There's no music." "So what?" They danced in the library, no music, no witnesses, just two people who'd fought through hell and somehow found each other on the other side. "I love you," Rowan said. "In case I haven't mentioned it recently." "You mentioned it this morning." "Figured I'd mention it again, for emphasis." Elara laughed. Actually laughed. It felt like flying. "I love you too. Even though you're terrible at dancing, I'm excellent at dancing. You're stepping on my feet. That's strategic. Keeps you on your toes." They spun through the library, knocking over books, not caring. For one night, they weren't the Duke and Duchess of Ashford. They weren't reformers or radicals or targets. They were just Elara and Rowan. And for now, that was enough. The summer storms came early that year. Elara was in the fields when the first drops fell, helping with the wheat harvest. Her hands were blistered, her dress mud-stained. Mrs. Hartwell would have had a heart attack if she'd seen the Duchess of Ashford working like a common laborer. Elara didn't care. "Rain's coming hard," Thomas called out, squinting at the darkening sky. "We need to get the rest in before it hits." "How much time?" "Hour, maybe less." They worked faster. Everyone did. Tenants, servants, even Rowan, who'd abandoned his ledgers to help. The wheat was their survival. Lose it to rain and mold, and winter would be brutal. The storm broke 30 minutes later. They'd saved 3/4 of the harvest. Not perfect, but enough. Elara stood in the barn, soaked and exhausted, watching rain hammer the roof. "Could have been worse," Rowan said beside her. "Could have been better." "When is it ever?" She looked at him, covered in mud, grinning like an idiot. "You're enjoying this." "What, manual labor and potential starvation? It's exhilarating." Despite everything, she laughed. That night, after everyone had dried off and the harvest was secured, Elara found a letter waiting in her study. Parliamentary seal. Her stomach tightened. "Bad news?" Rowan asked, appearing with tea. "Don't know yet." She broke the seal and read, then read again. "Well?" "They want me to present the Blackthorn model to the full Parliament. Public session, next month." "That's huge. That's terrifying. Same thing with you." She set down the letter. "Rowan, what if I fail? What if I stand in front of Parliament and they tear everything apart?" "Then we rebuild, like always." "You make it sound easy." "It's never easy, but we keep doing it anyway." He pulled her close. "Besides, you've already won. The committee endorsed us. Parliament's just making it official." "Nothing's official until it's voted on." "Then we make sure the votes are there." She rested her head against his chest. "When did you become the optimistic one?" "About 6 months ago. You're a bad influence. Blom." The next weeks blurred together. Preparing testimony. Coordinating with sympathetic MPs, fielding attacks from the Property Rights Alliance, who'd ramped up their campaign against the reforms. Lord Cunningham published a pamphlet titled The Blackthorn Delusion, Why Kindness Will Destroy England. It was equal parts hysterical and vicious. "He's scared," Catherine Reed said during one of their strategy sessions. "The other landowners are abandoning him. He's losing influence." "Scared people are dangerous," Elara said. "So are angry duchesses. You'll be fine." But 3 days before the parliamentary session, disaster struck again. A rider arrived at dawn with urgent news. The northern estates that had adopted their model were facing coordinated sabotage, fires, poisoned wells, destroyed equipment. "It's Cunningham," Rowan said, reading the report. "Has to be." "Can we prove it?" "Not quickly enough." Elara felt rage building. "He's trying to make us look incompetent, show that our approach creates chaos." "It's working. 2 estates have already abandoned the model." "Then we go there. We show them it's sabotage, not failure." "The parliamentary session is in 3 days, so we have 3 days. Let's move." They rode north with a small group, Catherine, Thomas, Bess, and 6 tenants who'd volunteered. The journey took 18 brutal hours. The damage was worse than reported. One estate had lost half its housing. Another's water supply was contaminated. Families were terrified, landowners furious. "This is what you brought us," one landowner, Lord Marsh, shouted at Elara. "Chaos and destruction." "This is what your enemies brought you," Elara shot back. "Because they're scared you're succeeding." "Succeeding? Look around." "I am looking. I see sabotage. Deliberate, coordinated sabotage designed to make you give up." "How do you know?" "Oh, because they did the same to us. Twice. And we survived." Marsh hesitated. "What do you suggest?" "We rebuild. Together. We document everything. We prove this was sabotage and we prosecute." "That takes time. So start now." It took 2 days of brutal work. Cleaning wells, salvaging housing, gathering evidence. Elara worked alongside everyone else, her parliamentary dress abandoned for work clothes. On the second night, Catherine found her sitting by a rebuilt cottage, hands wrapped in fresh bandages. "You're going to miss the session," Catherine said. "I know. They'll interpret it as weakness, running away." "Let them. These people need help now. Parliament can wait." "Elara, I'm not leaving them, Catherine. If that costs us the vote, so be it." Catherine studied her, then smiled. "You've really changed." Have I? The woman I interviewed 6 months ago would have prioritized the political fight. You're prioritizing people. Is that stupid? Probably, but it's right. Damned. Rowan returned to London alone to buy them time. He addressed Parliament the morning Elara was supposed to testify, explaining her absence. The chamber erupted. "The Duchess can't be bothered to appear?" one MP shouted. "The Duchess is currently preventing a humanitarian crisis," Rowan replied coldly. "Something you'd understand if you'd ever left London. This is unacceptable. What's unacceptable is the coordinated sabotage of estates that dared to try something new, estates that were succeeding until someone decided to burn them down." Lord Halifax intervened. "Your Grace, these are serious accusations. Do you have proof?" "My wife is gathering it. She'll present it when she arrives." "And when will that be?" "When she's done saving lives." The session was postponed. Conservative MPs howled about disrespect and contempt. But Rowan held firm. He sent a letter north. "Take your time. I'll hold them." Elara read it standing in the ruins of a burned cottage, tears in her eyes. "He's buying a space," she told Catherine. "Then use it." They spent another week rebuilding. By the time they finished, the estates were stable. Not perfect. Recovery would take months, but functional. And they had evidence, testimonies, physical proof of the sabotage, enough to build a case. Lord Marsh approached Elara the day before they left. "I owe you an apology," he said stiffly. "I blamed you for this. But you're right. This was sabotage. And you didn't have to come here. You risked your political standing to help us. I couldn't leave you to face this alone." "Why not?" "Because that's what they want, for us to be isolated, afraid, alone. We're stronger together." He nodded slowly. "When you address Parliament, you'll have my support, for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything." Elara arrived back in London looking like she'd been through a war. Because she had. The parliamentary session was rescheduled for the next day. She had 12 hours to prepare. Rowan met her at Blackthorn House. He looked exhausted. "You came back," he said. "Of course I came back. I wasn't sure. Thought you might stay north, keep helping. And miss my chance to tell Parliament exactly what I think of them? Never." He kissed her, hard and desperate. "I missed you. I was gone a week. Longest week of my life." They spent the night reviewing evidence, crafting testimony, preparing for battle. By dawn, Elara was ready, or as ready as she'd ever be. Parliament was packed, every seat filled. Journalists lined the walls. The gallery overflowed with spectators, nobles and commoners mixing in a way that would have been scandalous a year ago. Elara walked to the witness stand, aware of every eye on her. She looked terrible and knew it. Still in traveling clothes, mud on her boots, bandages on her hands. Perfect. Lord Halifax called the session to order. "Duchess Blackthorn, thank you for finally appearing." "Thank you for waiting," she said evenly. "You were expected 2 weeks ago." "I was preventing people from dying. I prioritized accordingly." Murmurs ran through the chamber. Halifax frowned. "You claim the northern estates were sabotaged. Present your evidence." Elara spent the next hour laying it out methodically. Witness statements, physical evidence, financial records showing payments to known agitators, all of it pointing to a coordinated campaign. "And who do you believe orchestrated this?" Halifax asked. "Members of the Property Rights Alliance, specifically Lord Cunningham and his associates." The chamber exploded. Cunningham leapt to his feet. "This is slander." "It's fact, backed by evidence." "You have no proof I was personally involved." "I have testimony from 3 men you hired. They're willing to testify in exchange for leniency." Cunningham went pale. The room descended into chaos. Halifax gavelled for order. "This committee will investigate these accusations thoroughly. In the meantime, Duchess, let's return to your estate management approach." "Gladly." The questioning resumed, but the tone had shifted. They weren't attacking anymore, they were listening. Elara talked about the estates she'd just saved. The families rebuilt. The evidence that their model worked even under assault. "Our approach isn't perfect," she said. "Nothing is. But it's sustainable, it's humane, and it works. Not because it's idealistic, because it's practical. Healthy workers are productive workers. Stable families don't revolt. This isn't charity, it's common sense. A progressive MP spoke up. And what about the costs? Critics claim your model is too expensive. Short term? Yes, we invest more upfront in housing, food, medical care. But long term, we save money, lower turnover, higher productivity, fewer losses to unrest or sabotage, when it's not deliberate. So you're proposing we rebuild the entire system? I'm proposing we stop letting the system kill people. How we do that is up to you. The session ran 6 hours. By the end, Elara was swaying on her feet, but she'd said everything she needed to say. Halifax called for a recess before the vote. Elara stumbled outside. Rowan was waiting with water and a chair. "You were magnificent," he said. "I was desperate." "Same thing," Catherine appeared. "Early polling looks good. I think you've got the votes." "Don't jinx it." They reconvened an hour later. The chamber felt different, tenser, like everyone knew this mattered. Halifax stood. "We will now vote on the recommendation to adopt the Blackthorn estate management model as official best practice, with government support for implementation." The voting took 10 minutes, 47 in favor, 28 opposed. They'd won. The chamber erupted, some cheering, some protesting. Elara sat frozen, not quite believing it. "We won," Rowan said beside her. "We won." "Say it again." "We won." She started laughing, couldn't stop. "We actually won." Halifax gavelled for order. The motion passes. Additionally, given the evidence presented regarding estate sabotage, this body recommends criminal investigation of Lord Cunningham and named associates. Cunningham stormed out. His allies followed, but Elara noticed something else. MPS approaching her. Not to argue, to ask questions. Real questions about implementation. "How do we start?" one asked. "What's the biggest challenge, what the sauce?" another wanted to know. She answered each one, exhausted but determined. This was what winning looked like. Not glory, just work. The news spread across England faster than wildfire. Within days, estate managers were requesting training. Landowners were adopting the model. The government established an office to support implementation. Elara became something she'd never expected, an authority. They invited her to speak at universities, to consult on legislation, to train the next generation of estate managers. She said yes to some, no to others, tried to find balance between the work and her life, because somewhere in the chaos, she'd realized something important. She was pregnant. She told Rowan one quiet evening in their estate library. "I'm pregnant." He dropped the book he was holding. "What?" "Pregnant. With child. Expecting. Pick your euphemism." He stared at her, then started laughing. "We're having a baby." "Apparently." "When?" "Winter. January, maybe February." He pulled her close. I don't even know what this is." "Terrifying?" "That too. But also wonderful. Impossible. How did we get here?" She thought about it. The wedding night when he'd made her feel worthless. The frozen months of survival. The fires and fights and small victories that had slowly, impossibly built something real. "We fought," she said simply. "For everything. For each other. For people who needed us. And somehow, we won. Not without cost." "No, never without cost." He kissed her forehead. "You're going to be an amazing mother. I'm going to be a disaster. Same thing with you." The baby arrived in February during a snowstorm. Labor lasted 14 hours. Elara cursed Rowan's name at least 100 times. He held her hand through all of it, even when she threatened to murder him. The midwife placed the baby in her arms as dawn broke. A girl, small and red and screaming. "She's perfect," Rowan whispered. "She's furious, look at her." Takes after her mother. Elara held their daughter and felt something she'd never felt before. Complete, total, overwhelming love. "What should we name her?" Rowan asked. "Hope." He looked at her. "Really? It's what she represents, what we fought for, what we built." Hope Blackthorn. He tested it. I like it. They sat together as snow fell outside, holding their daughter, and Elara realized that this small, screaming, perfect human was what everything had been for, not the reforms or the recognition or the political victories. A future where children could grow up safe, fed, loved, a future worth building. Spring came slowly that year. Elara recovered from childbirth while managing the estate and fielding requests from across the country. It was exhausting and chaotic and somehow wonderful. The first estate outside their region to fully implement their model sent results. Productivity up 30%, tenant satisfaction at record highs. More followed. The movement they'd started was becoming permanent. Lord Cunningham was convicted of conspiracy and sentenced to 8 years. His allies scattered, the Property Rights Alliance dissolved. Edward Witcom died in prison that April. Pneumonia, they said. Elara received a letter from the warden informing her. She read it once, then filed it away. She felt nothing. He'd stopped being her father long before he died. His death just made it official. Rowan found her in the garden later, staring at the roses. "You all right?" he asked. "Fine." "That's not an answer," she sighed. "I thought I'd feel something. Relief, maybe. Or grief. But there's just nothing. Is that terrible?" "No, it's honest. He was my father. He was a man who hurt you for years. You don't owe him grief." She leaned against him. "When did you get so wise?" "I married well." They stood in the garden as Hope slept in her cradle nearby, the estate blooming around them. "We did it," Elara said quietly. "Everything we said we'd do. We actually did it. Most of it. There's still work. There's always work." "True. But we have help now. We're not alone." She looked around. Tenant families working the fields, children playing, gardens thriving, the fountain flowing, everything they'd saved and built and fought for. "No," she agreed. "We're not." Quote, 2 years later, Parliament passed the Estate Reform Act. It codified the Blackthorn model into law. Minimum housing standards, wage protections, healthcare access, education requirements, everything they'd fought for. Elara attended the signing ceremony with Rowan and Hope, who was now a toddler more interested in stealing important documents than witnessing history. The Prime Minister approached them afterward. "Duchess, Duke, congratulations." "Thank you, Prime Minister." "I'll be honest. 2 years ago I thought you were radicals destined to fail. I'm glad I was wrong." "So are we," Elara said. "What's next for you?" She looked at Rowan. They discussed this. "We're going home," she said. "The estate needs us. Our daughter needs us. And honestly, we're tired of London. Can't say I blame you, but if you ever want to return to public life, we'll let you know." They left the ceremony early, Hope asleep on Rowan's shoulder. "Do you regret it?" Rowan asked as their carriage rolled through London streets. "Leaving politics?" "Not even a little." "Do you?" "I regret ever being involved in the first place. I'm a terrible politician." "You're a wonderful advocate." "That's different." He smiled. "We made a difference, didn't we?" "We changed the world, just a little bit, but enough." They returned to the estate in early summer. The fields were golden. The cottages stood strong. Children played in gardens Elara had saved from death. Thomas met them at the gates, grinning. "Welcome home, your graces." "Good to be home, Thomas. How are the roses?" "Thriving, like everything else." Bess had prepared a welcome dinner. Mrs. Hartwell had even baked a cake, though she'd never admit it was for them specifically. That night, after Hope was asleep and the household quiet, Elara and Rowan sat in their bedroom, the same room where she'd spent that first terrible night, feeling purchased and worthless. "Do you remember our wedding night?" she asked. "Unfortunately." "You told me this marriage was a transaction, an heir for security." "I was an idiot." "You were honest. At the time, that's what it was." He took her hand. "And now?" "Now it's everything. You're everything." "Same." He kissed her. Though if we're being technical, we did fulfill the original contract. I got my heir, you got security. I got more than security. I got a partner, a life, a purpose. I got a wife who terrifies me on a regular basis and makes me better than I ever thought I could be. So we both won. Spectacularly. They made love slowly, quietly, in a bed that had once felt like a prison and now felt like home. Afterward, lying tangled together, Elara thought about everything that had happened. The girl who'd been forced into marriage, the duke who'd been frozen by loss, the estate that had been dying, all of it saved, all of it transformed. Not because they were perfect. They weren't. They'd made mistakes, failed dozens of times, hurt each other and themselves. But they'd kept trying, and somehow, impossibly, that had been enough. 5 years later, the estate was unrecognizable. What had been a dying monument to tradition had become something else entirely. A thriving community, a model for the rest of England. Elara stood at her window, watching Hope, now 7, chase butterflies through gardens that bloomed year-round. A second child, a boy they'd named Thomas after the old gardener, toddled after her. Rowan appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Happy? He asked. Exhausted. But yes. Same. Below, tenant families were gathering for the Harvest Festival, an annual tradition Elara had started. Everyone came together, nobles and commoners, landowners and workers, to celebrate the year's work. It shouldn't have worked. Society said it couldn't, but it did. I never thanked you, Elara said suddenly. For what? For trying. That day in the rain when I told you to try. You did. You kept trying even when it was hard. You made it impossible not to. You were so stubborn and brave and infuriating. I couldn't stay frozen around you. I wasn't brave. I was desperate. Same thing. She turned in his arms. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd given up? If I'd stayed quiet, you'd stayed cold, we'd just survived? We wouldn't have survived. Not really. We'd have just existed. And now? Now we're living. Actually living. Together. The festival started below, music and laughter drifting up. Hope ran over, dragging Thomas by the hand. Mama, Papa, come on, you're missing everything. They went down together, joining the celebration. Elara danced with tenant children. Rowan argued good-naturedly with farmers about crop rotation. Thomas ate half a pie by himself. As the sun set, Elara stood at the edge of the gathering, watching. Catherine Reed appeared beside her. She visited occasionally, still writing about the reforms. Look at this, Catherine said. Everything you built. We built it. All of us. But you started it. You refused to give up. Elara thought about the woman she'd been on her wedding day. Scared, overlooked, convinced she was worthless. That woman was gone. Replaced by someone stronger. Not unbreakable. She'd never be that. But resilient. Determined. Loved. I didn't have a choice, Elara said. It was fight or die. Everyone has a choice. You chose to fight. So did a lot of people. But you showed them it was possible. That's what matters. Rowan found her as the stars came out. Hope and Thomas were asleep on a blanket, surrounded by other children. We should get them to bed, he said. In a minute. They stood together watching the festival wind down. Watching the community they'd built, the lives they'd saved, the future they'd made possible. I love you, Elara said. In case I haven't mentioned it recently. You mentioned it this morning. Figured I'd mention it again, for emphasis. He laughed and pulled her close. I love you too, even though you're still terrible at following rules. Rules are boring. So are you sometimes. But I love you anyway. They carried their children home as the moon rose over the estate. The same estate that had once been a tomb. Now it was filled with life and light and laughter. Everything they'd fought for. Everything they'd become. In the morning, there would be more work, more challenges, more fights. But tonight, Elara Blackthorne, once overlooked, once purchased, once broken, stood in her home with her family and felt something she'd never expected to feel. Complete. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. Life was still hard. The world still needed changing, but she'd proven something important. That one person, refusing to give up, could change everything. That cold marriages could become warm. That frozen hearts could thaw. That dying estates could bloom. That love, real love, earned through fire and struggle and stubborn determination, could survive anything, even the storm.